Do you ever feel like you're moving, but not actually going anywhere? Like your life is happening, but you're not really in it? Like you woke up one day, and the map you thought you had just disappeared. You're not broken, you're not behind, and you're definitely not alone. But here's what no one tells you: that feeling of being lost. It's not a flaw, it's a signal. Today, we're not just talking about feeling lost. We're talking about why it happens and how an ancient philosophy, Stoicism, can quietly, powerfully bring you back to yourself. Not with motivation, not with hype, but with clarity. By the end, you won't just understand why you feel this way. You'll know what to do next. And I want to start with something before we get into any of it. This isn't a lecture. This isn't a list of things to fix. This is a conversation, the kind you probably haven't had with anyone about what's actually going on inside. Because the truth is, most people carrying this feeling are also carrying it completely alone. Not because no one would listen, because it's hard to explain. How do you describe feeling lost to someone who sees your life from the outside and thinks everything looks fine? How do you explain the quiet version of not being okay, the one that doesn't have a crisis attached, that doesn't give you a reason to fall apart, that just sits underneath everything like a low hum you can't quite locate? You've probably tried, and the response was probably something like, "You have so much going for you. Other people have it so much worse. Just stay positive." And you know they mean well. And you also know that those responses completely miss the thing. So let me try to name it instead. It's the feeling of waking up and going through the motions of a day that looks fine from every external angle, and feeling somewhere underneath, like none of it is quite real. Like you're watching your own life from slightly outside of it. Like you're present in the room but not fully in the moment. Like the version of you that shows up every day is doing everything right. And the version of you that's watching keeps waiting for something to shift. That's the feeling. And if that's the feeling you brought into this video, I want you to know that it's real, it's valid, and it makes complete sense. Not because something is wrong with you, because something in you is trying to change. Before we go further, if this is something you needed to hear, subscribe and stay on this journey, because what we're about to talk about can genuinely change how you experience your life. Let's start with something uncomfortable. You don't feel lost because you don't have direction. You feel lost because the direction you've been following was never really yours. Think about it. From the moment you were old enough to understand what success was supposed to look like, someone was telling you. School told you which results mattered, which subjects were serious, which path was respectable. Social media showed you what happiness should look like, what a relationship should look like, what a body should look like, what an age-appropriate achievement should feel like. The people around you, without ever meaning to, projected their own definition of a good life onto every observation they made about yours. When are you going to settle down? Shouldn't you be further along by now? Why would you leave a good job? And somewhere along the way, across years of absorbing all of that, you started walking a path you never consciously chose. You built a life that made sense to everyone around you. And it fits. It fits well enough, but it doesn't feel like yours. And that gap between the life that fits and the life that feels like yours is exactly where the lostness lives. You wake up, check your phone, scroll, see someone you went to school with posting about a promotion, a holiday that looks like a film set, a relationship that looks effortless, and within 30 seconds, you're not in your life anymore. You're in theirs, measuring the gap, building the case against your own choices. Your coffee goes cold, the morning gets away from you, and you haven't even been awake for 20 minutes, and already something has been quietly taken. Not by the person who posted, by the meaning you gave it. That's how the day starts. And if that's how the day starts, think about how it ends. Already slightly behind, already slightly less than, already slightly lost. And you didn't do anything wrong, you just woke up. But wait, what if the problem isn't your life? What if it's your expectations of it? What if you've been measuring something real against something curated? What if the gap you're feeling isn't evidence of failure, but evidence of comparison? And what if comparison is the specific thing that is making something good feel like it isn't enough? Stoic insight number 1. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood this, not as a theory, from lived experience. He was a slave. He had nothing that the world around him considered valuable. No status, no property, no freedom of movement. And from that position, he wrote the most powerful philosophy of personal freedom in recorded history. Not because his circumstances improved, because he found something that circumstances couldn't touch. He said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That sounds harsh on first read, maybe even dismissive, but look at what he's actually saying. The moment you stop organizing your life around what looks good to others, the moment you release the need for your choices to make sense to everyone watching, is the moment you can finally make decisions that make sense to you. He's not saying stop caring. He's saying stop outsourcing your direction to people who aren't living your life. And that's a completely different instruction. You feel lost because you've been trying to meet invisible standards. Standards you didn't choose. Standards that shift depending on who's watching. Standards that can never quite be met because they weren't designed for you. They were designed for a general audience. And Stoicism begins here, not with a plan, not with a strategy, with a question. One honest, uncomfortable question. What is actually in my control? Not rhetorically. Actually, right now, in this specific life, at this specific moment. What is yours? And what have you been spending your energy on that was never yours to begin with? Because once you truly understand that distinction, once you can feel the line between what is yours and what isn't, everything changes. Not all at once, not dramatically, quietly, like something that had been tense for a long time, finally releasing. The illusion of control. Let's talk about control, because this is where most people quietly fall apart. And I mean that gently. Because the falling apart isn't dramatic. It's not a breakdown, it's not a crisis. It's a slow, exhausting accumulation of trying to hold things that were never designed to be held. You think you're lost because you don't know what to do. But often, you feel lost because you're trying to control things you never could. You try to control how people see you. Every message carefully worded, every post considered, every interaction reviewed afterward. Was that the right thing to say? Did I come across well? What do they think of me now? You try to control how your future turns out. Planning, preparing, rehearsing, building contingency plans for contingency plans, running scenarios in your head for situations that haven't happened and may never happen. You try to control how quickly things should happen, setting timelines, comparing your progress to invisible benchmarks, feeling behind in a race no one officially started, and when it doesn't go your way, you spiral. Not outwardly, you keep it together on the outside, but internally, the story starts running. I'm doing something wrong. Other people have figured this out. Why can't I get this right? What is wrong with me? And the spiral tightens, not because of what happened, because of the meaning you attach to it. But here's the truth. You were never meant to control those things. Not because you're not capable enough. Not because you're not trying hard enough. Because those things are structurally outside of anyone's control. Other people's perceptions of you, not yours. The timeline of your progress, not yours. How quickly life rewards effort, never been yours. And the exhaustion you feel, the specific bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't quite fix, is the exhaustion of someone who has been gripping tightly to things that cannot be gripped. Marcus Aurelius understood this, and he had more to control than almost any human being in history. An empire, wars, a plague, the loyalty of people who had every reason to betray him, and every morning, before any of that had access to him, he wrote to himself. Not for anyone to read, just for himself. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not power over outcomes, not power over other people, not power over timing. Power over your mind, the way you interpret events, the way you respond to difficulty, the way you choose what to carry and what to put down. That's it. That's the full scope of what is actually yours. And it sounds small until you realize that it's the only thing that has ever mattered." Let me be specific about what this means in practice. You don't control whether the message gets a response. You control whether you send it with integrity. You don't control whether the work gets recognition. You control whether the work is done honestly. You don't control how long the journey takes. You control the quality of your effort today. That's the shift. From trying to manage the outcome to focusing entirely on what you can actually influence. And when you make that shift, not just intellectually, but actually, something changes in the body. Because the weight you've been carrying wasn't the work, it was the outcome you were trying to guarantee. And outcomes were never yours to guarantee. That tight feeling in your chest, that low-grade anxiety that doesn't have a specific cause, that sense of drifting even when you're working hard, it's not because you're weak. It's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because you've been carrying what was never yours to carry. And you've been doing it for so long that it started to feel normal. It isn't normal. It's the specific weight of trying to control what cannot be controlled. And the moment you put it down, not all at once, not perfectly, but moment by moment, the tightness starts to ease. So what happens when you finally put it down? What does it feel like to move through a day carrying only what's actually yours? We're going to get there. But first, there's something underneath the anxiety, something quieter, something that most people don't talk about because it's harder to explain than sadness. Let's go deeper, because sometimes it's not even sadness. It's nothing. You're not crying, not breaking down, not visibly struggling, just existing. And that nothing, that quiet, pervasive, low-grade nothing, is in some ways harder to name than the pain would be. Because pain has a location, pain has a cause. Pain gives you something to point to and say, that is what's wrong. But this is just a dullness, a flatness, a sense that the color has been slightly turned down on everything. And you can't explain it because it's not dramatic enough to deserve explaining. And you can't fix it because you can't find the source. You laugh with friends, and it's real laughter, and you genuinely like these people, but it feels like you're watching it from a step away. Like you're present, but not quite. You achieve something that took effort, something that should feel significant. And there's a moment, a brief window, where it almost lands, and then it's gone. And you're already thinking about the next thing, or wondering why this one didn't feel like you thought it would. You rest, genuinely rest. A weekend where you did nothing. And you wake up Monday still tired, not physically tired. The other kind. The kind that sleep doesn't fix because it's not coming from your body. That's not laziness. That's not ingratitude. That's not you being difficult or broken or asking too much of your own life. That's disconnection, a very specific kind. The kind that happens when you've spent too long living slightly outside of yourself. Always a little bit in your head. Always a little bit in the past or the future. Always slightly somewhere else even when you're physically present. Seneca, one of the most brilliant minds of the ancient world, wrote about this exact experience. Not philosophically, from within it. He struggled with the numbness too, with the flatness, with the feeling of being surrounded by a full life that wasn't quite reaching him. And he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Read that again with the numbness in mind. Because what he's describing is not just anxiety, it's the specific cost of living in your head instead of your life. When you're always in the what if, you are never in the what is. When you're always in the comparison, you are never in your own experience. When you're always rehearsing the future or replaying the past, the present becomes a place you're just passing through. And a life you're just passing through is a life you can't actually feel. You've been living in your head, not lazily. Not because you want to, because the head feels safer than the present. The head gives you the illusion of control. If I plan enough, prepare enough, worry enough, maybe I can prevent the things I'm afraid of. The present just is. And what is uncertain, impermanent, sometimes painful. But the head has a cost. The cost is presence. And presence is where life is actually happening. When you're always thinking about, what if this doesn't work out? Why is everyone else further along? What should I be doing differently? You stop experiencing what is. And life, real, actual, felt life, starts to feel unreal. Not because it isn't there, because you're not. And here's what that costs you specifically. It costs you the good moments, the ones that should land, the achievement, the connection, the laughter. They arrive, and you're slightly elsewhere, and they pass. And you feel the ghost of them rather than the thing itself. And you wonder why you can't feel what you should feel. And the wondering pulls you further into your head. And the cycle continues. This is not a character flaw. This is what happens when presence becomes a practice you haven't been taught. And presence is teachable. That's the thing. It can be learned. Not as a discipline, as a return. So how do you come back? Not to your goals, not to your plans, not to the version of yourself you think you should be, but to yourself. The actual, present, real version. The one that's been waiting underneath all the noise for you to notice it's still there. That's where we're going next. Here's where Stoicism becomes practical. And I want to be specific about what I mean by practical. Not a 10-step program. Not a daily routine you'll do for 3 days and abandon. A reset. A specific, quiet, honest turning toward what is actually here. Because the lostness, the numbness, the disconnection, the exhaustion, all of it comes from the same source. Being somewhere other than where you are. And the reset begins with one thing. One thing that sounds so simple, it almost sounds too simple. Slowing down. Step 1, slow down. Not forever. Not as a lifestyle change. Not as a productivity strategy, just long enough to notice. Because you have been moving. Constantly. Not just physically, mentally. Always processing, always planning, always producing or consuming or managing something. And the thing that gets lost in all of that movement is the signal your own life is sending you. The quiet voice that knows what actually matters to you. The one that knows which relationships feel real, which work feels like yours, which direction actually calls to you underneath all the noise. That voice doesn't shout. It can't be heard over the movement. It can only be heard in the stillness, and you haven't given it stillness. Right now, wherever you are, look around, just for a moment. Notice something small, the quality of the light, the temperature of the air, a sound you weren't tracking until now. You're here. Whatever has happened, whatever hasn't happened yet, whatever you're carrying, whatever you don't know how to solve, right now, you're here. And here is not nothing. Here is the only place where anything actually changes. Here is the only place where you can make a different choice. Here is the only place where the life you want to live is actually available. Not in the future where things are figured out. Not in the past where things were clearer. Here. Now. This moment. And that means you're not starting from nothing. You never were. The feeling of being lost convinced you that you had lost your starting point. That you were behind the beginning. That you had to get back to something before you could move forward. You don't. This is the starting point. This moment. Exactly as it is. Marcus Aurelius returned to this more than almost any other teaching. In his private journals, written in the middle of wars, in the middle of a plague, in the middle of genuine, enormous difficulty, he wrote this simple instruction to himself. Confine yourself to the present. 2 words, that's all. Not figure out the future. Not correct the past. Not resolve everything that feels uncertain. Confine yourself to the present. What is actually here right now that I can see clearly? What is actually in front of me that I can respond to? What is actually available to me in this moment? Those are the only questions that produce clarity. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It doesn't come from planning more thoroughly. It doesn't come from waiting until the conditions are better. It comes from being present enough to see what's actually there. Here's what the reset actually does. It doesn't solve your problems. It doesn't give you a 5-year plan. It doesn't tell you what direction to go. It removes the noise that has been preventing you from hearing your own signal. Because underneath the comparison, underneath the anxiety, underneath the exhaustion of trying to control what you were never meant to control, there is something that knows, a part of you that has always known what actually matters, what actually feels like yours, what direction would feel real if you gave yourself permission to take it. The reset is not about finding that thing. It's about creating the conditions in which that thing can be heard. The person who feels most lost in life is often just someone who hasn't paused long enough to listen to themselves. They've been so busy responding to everything external, the expectations, the comparisons, the noise, that their own voice has been drowned out for years. And the listening, even a few minutes of genuine quiet listening, starts to bring it back. Not all at once, in fragments. A clarity about one specific thing. A sense that one particular direction feels different from the others. A recognition that one part of your current life feels genuinely like yours, and other parts don't. That's the beginning of navigation, not a destination. The first reliable piece of the map. And when you do listen, when you create enough stillness to hear what has been waiting there, what do you actually hear? That's the hardest part, and the most important. Because what you hear when the noise finally drops is your truth. And your truth might be more different from your current life than you expected. This is the part most people avoid. Not because they don't want to know, but because when the noise fades, when the comparison stops and the planning quiets and the performance drops, you're left with something uncomfortable, your truth. And your truth might be that some things you've been building toward aren't actually what you want. And that is one of the most disorienting things a person can realize, because you've invested in them, time, energy, identity, and the realization that the investment was pointed in the wrong direction. That's not a comfortable thing, but it is an honest one. And honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is always the beginning of something better. Micro scenario. Maybe you don't want the career you're chasing. Not because the career is bad, because it was chosen for reasons that made sense 10 years ago, and those reasons don't describe who you are anymore. Maybe you don't enjoy the life you've built, not the whole of it, but parts. Parts that you've been quiet about. Parts you've been rationalizing. Parts you've been too afraid to examine closely in case examining them means you have to do something about them. Maybe you've outgrown people you still hold on to. Not because those people are bad, because you've changed. And the relationship is built around a version of you that isn't fully you anymore. And staying in it requires you to be slightly smaller than you've become. And you notice that every time you're with them, and you say nothing, because saying something feels like betrayal. And so you carry a quiet grief about something you haven't even named yet. And that's scary, all of it. Naming things makes them real, and real things require responses. But here's the other side of that. Naming things also makes them yours. And something that is named and owned and seen clearly is something you can actually work with. The unnamed thing lives in the space between knowing and not knowing. And that space is where lostness breeds. The named thing, even the painful named thing, gives you something to navigate from. And navigation is what ends being lost. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." First say to yourself what you would be. Not what you would achieve, not what you would have, not what would look impressive or make sense to the people watching. What you would be, what kind of person, what values lived daily, not just stated, what way of moving through the world that would feel at the end of a day like you. That's the question underneath all of it. Not, what should I do with my life? But who do I actually want to be? And most people have never sat with that question long enough to get past the surface answers. The surface answers sound like goals: successful, respected, secure, happy. The real answers sound like values: honest, present, useful, free, connected, purposeful. And the gap between the surface goals you've been chasing and the real values trying to surface is the gap where the lostness lives. Closing that gap is not about making dramatic changes. It's about making honest ones, one at a time, starting with the smallest available honesty. Here's what that looks like in practice. You can't navigate without knowing your direction, and you can't know your direction if you're afraid of your own honesty. The fear makes sense, because your honesty might point somewhere that feels risky. That requires something. That involves a conversation you've been avoiding, or a change you've been postponing, or an admission that something isn't working that you've been calling fine. But here's the thing about that fear. It's protecting you from a discomfort that is smaller than the discomfort of staying lost. The discomfort of honesty is acute. It arrives and it costs something, and it passes. The discomfort of staying lost is chronic. It sits there quietly, every day, underneath everything. And chronic is a much harder weight to carry than acute. Emotional connection, feeling lost, genuinely, deeply, honestly lost, is often not the end of something. It is the beginning of something, not the beginning you ordered, not the beginning that looks exciting from the outside, but the specific beginning that your specific life in its specific moment is ready for. And that beginning starts with one honest answer, not your whole truth. One piece of it, the piece you've been quietest about. So what happens next? Once you know what you want, even approximately, even incompletely, how do you actually move forward? Because knowing and moving are two completely different things, and the gap between them is where most people get stuck for a very long time. Here's the part no one likes. You don't need certainty to move. I know that's not what you want to hear, because certainty feels like the prerequisite. It feels like, once I know exactly what I want, once I'm sure about the direction, once I've figured out the full plan, then I'll move. And that waiting, that reasonable, responsible, understandable waiting, is how people stay in exactly the same place for years. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, because they've made movement conditional on a feeling that was never going to arrive before the movement. Certainty doesn't come before action. It comes from action. The clarity you're waiting for, the sense of yes, this is right, this is mine, is built through the doing. Not the planning, not the researching, not the waiting, the doing. You've been thinking about sending a message to someone you've been out of touch with, someone who mattered, someone you've thought about reaching out to and then found a reason not to. It's been too long. They've probably moved on. What would I even say? And so the message doesn't get sent, and another month passes, and the thought comes back, and you find another reason, or you've had an idea, something creative, or professional, or personal, something that feels like yours in a way most things don't, and you've been letting it live in your head where it's safe, where it can be perfect, where it can't fail, and it stays there. And it starts to feel like evidence of something you could have done if you had been braver. Send the message, try the idea, change one small thing. Not because you're certain, because the certainty is on the other side of the attempt, not this side. Clarity doesn't come before action, it comes from action, every time, without exception. The people who seem certain, who move through their lives with direction and confidence, are not people who figured it out before they started. They're people who started and built the clarity as they went. They tried things, some worked, some didn't. The ones that worked became direction, the ones that didn't became information. And both are useful. Both move you forward. Both are better than standing still waiting for certainty to arrive. Seneca wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." That gets quoted often as a statement about success, but I want you to hear it differently. It's a statement about the relationship between readiness and movement. You prepare, meaning you develop yourself, you build the skills, you tend to the qualities that matter. And then you move, meaning you step into opportunities rather than waiting for them to be guaranteed. And where those two things meet, preparation and movement, is where things start to shift, not dramatically, not all at once, but noticeably. In the specific way that tells you you've moved from being lost to being in motion. And motion, even imperfect, uncertain, incomplete motion, feels fundamentally different from standing still. Here's what happens the moment you move, even slightly, even imperfectly. The internal narrative changes. Instead of, "I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go," it becomes, "I tried something. I'm in the middle of something. I'm figuring something out." Those are completely different stories, and the story you tell about where you are changes where you go. Waiting is a story, moving is a story, and moving, even uncertain, messy, imperfect moving, is always the story that ends somewhere different from where it started. You're not behind. I want to say that again because it needs to be felt, not just heard. You are not behind. There is no timeline you've missed. There is no version of on track that your life is failing to match. There is just where you are and where you want to go, and the movement between those two things. You're not starting late, you're starting from exactly here. And here, as imperfect and uncertain as it feels, is enough. It has always been enough. Because the moment you move from here, even the smallest possible movement, you are no longer lost. You are in motion. And motion, however imperfect, has a direction. And direction is the end of being lost. But there's one final piece, the one that holds all of this together, the one that makes it possible to keep moving on the days when the direction feels unclear again, on the days when the progress isn't visible, on the days when everything you're building looks smaller than what everyone else seems to have. That's the final part. And it might be the most important one. Here it is. Even when you find direction, even when the clarity arrives and the movement starts and something begins to feel like yours again, life won't be perfect. That's not a disclaimer. That's not me managing your expectations so you feel less disappointed later. That's the truth. And it's important to say it clearly before everything else. You will find direction. And you will still have days of doubt. You will build something. And there will still be days when it feels small. You will move forward. And you will still have moments of standing in the kitchen at 11 p.m. wondering if you're doing this right. And that's not failure. That's not a sign that the direction was wrong. That's not evidence that you're still lost. That's what being alive actually feels like. Not the curated version, the real one. And that's okay. More than okay. That's honest. Because the version of life where everything is figured out and nothing is uncertain and every day feels clear and purposeful, that's not a life anyone has ever had. Not Marcus Aurelius, not Epictetus, not Seneca, not anyone you admire, not anyone who looks certain from the outside. That version doesn't exist. And the pursuit of it, the belief that you should feel that way, that something is wrong because you don't, is itself part of what makes people feel lost. The goal is not the absence of uncertainty. The goal is a different relationship with it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, toward the end of his life after everything he had faced, something that I think is the most human thing ever written by someone the world considered extraordinary. Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny. Not control whatever comes, not prevent whatever comes, not be okay with whatever comes because at least it's for a reason. Accept, fully, with open hands, whatever arrives, the clarity and the confusion, the progress and the setback, the days when the direction is obvious and the days when it completely disappears, all of it woven into the pattern. All of it part of what this is. None of it proof that you're failing. Here's what acceptance actually means. Not everything happens for a reason. I'm not going to say that, because sometimes things just happen, and looking for the reason when there isn't one is its own kind of suffering. But everything can be used. That's different, and it's true. The confusion you've been feeling, it can be used. It has been pointing you towards something that the comfort of certainty would never have pointed you toward. The sadness, it's information about what matters to you, about what you've lost, about what you want to find. The feeling of being lost, it's a compass, telling you that something is misaligned, not to punish you, to redirect you, all of it usable, all of it part of the material from which a real, genuine, honest life is built, not in spite of the difficulty, through it. You're not failing at life. I want you to really let that land. You're not failing at life, you're in the middle of it. And the middle, with all its uncertainty and doubt and days that don't feel like enough and questions that don't have answers yet, is not the problem. The middle is where all of it actually happens. The connection, the growth, the gradual, unglamorous, beautiful process of becoming someone more honest than the person you were. And maybe this moment, right here, where you feel the most lost, where the questions feel the biggest, where the direction feels the least clear. Maybe this is actually the moment that changes things, not because it feels that way. Often the most important moments don't, but because you're here, asking the question, staying with the discomfort instead of running from it. And that, staying with it instead of numbing it or distracting it or performing past it, is where it begins, every time, without exception, calm, observant, unshakable, not as a destination, as a practice, not something you achieve, something you return to, daily, in the ordinary moments, when the noise is loudest, when the direction is least clear, when the question feels biggest. You return to what you can control, you return to the present, you return to what is actually yours. And from there, from that honest, grounded, present starting point, you move, one honest step, in your own direction, at your own pace. That's the end of being lost. If this helped you, if even one part of it felt like the conversation you needed to have, share it with someone who needs clarity, someone who's been quiet lately, someone you know is carrying this without saying so, and comment 3 words, still finding myself. Because if you're still here, if you made it through this entire conversation, that means something. It means you haven't given up on the question, and the people who don't give up on the question are the ones who eventually find the answer. Subscribe for daily content that meets you where you actually are, not where you're supposed to be. You're closer than you think.